Welcome back to our video series on the Play framework using Scala. In this video, we continue talking about testing our code, and I want to look at testing the controllers but outside of a web browser. So in a fundamental sense, a controller like this one, and I'm not doing our task list for a specific reason, of our application controller is just a class, which means you can instantiate it if you have the right arguments to pass it. And Play gives us some helpers to allow us to do that more easily. So I'm going to come down here to test, and I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call it the controller spec because I am testing a controller, but once again outside of a web browser. And so let's make a class for controller spec. And again, it will extend play spec. And we can set up the same type of English description of our test. So I'm going to just look at the application's index method. And that method must do some things for us. Now if we go look at this, it's been a while. So this has an index call that gives back our index view that has some stuff on it. And so basically I just want to make sure that this gives back the page that we are expecting. So it must give back expected page in. Okay. Like I said, this is just we want to call that method and have it basically do what it does and make sure that we get the contents that we want. Now, in order to call that method, we have to have an instance of the controller. How do we do that? Well, it's just a class, so I should be able to say new application, the one that's inside of controllers, so that gets imported. Now, that application had a controller components, and this is where the test code, the play test, has a thing called helpers that will give us a stub for the controller components. Okay, that way we can instantiate our application, and that is happy and it compiles. Now we can call the index method on controller. We can call index, and as an action, it has an apply method. And that apply method though needs a request. Now we don't have a request here. Here again, it turns out that there is inside of the library a fake request that we can build. Parentheses are important here because this is the companion object to our fake request, and we really want to call that apply method. If you leave the parentheses off, it does not call the apply method and things don't go the way that you want. So what does that give us back? Well, it gives us a result, but the result wrapped in a future. And honestly, I just want to check the text to make sure that it's correct. And they also have a nice helper for that. So there is a content as string that we can call on the result, and it should give us back this value as a string. Now this is unhappy right now, and that's because the content as string is actually nested under helpers, and we need to import helpers._. It brings in not only the content as string, but also an implicit argument for a timeout, because it's only going to wait so long for the future to happen. So now we have just a plain old string that is the contents there. And if we look at what this page on it, there are a few pieces of text that we should be able to easily pull out. So for example, play in Scala.js, that would be, so the body text must include that string. There's some other strings that I think would be good to verify here. So for example, click for new random number. And click for new random string. Okay, so now we have this spec that will instantiate our application and check to see if many of the things that are supposed to be on that page wind up actually being on that page. Let's see if it passes. So while this is compiling and running, it's worth discussing the issue of why I didn't do this with the task list. While it's potentially possible to do this with the task list, one thing that the task list needs, because it has these posts that are using CSRF tokens, it turns out that just making a call like this doesn't provide a CSRF token in there for you. And so if you write this exact same code for the task list 1 controller, it will fail. We're going to use a different approach for testing that. But if you have fairly simple calls, pages that are just giving you back values, or even things that we're supposed to build up JSON or whatnot, there are some other things inside of here that we could test theoretically. Actually, we could test product. It would be harder to test random number and random string because they are random. We could make sure that the thing that random number gave us back was actually a number. And this result would have some strings that we could search for in it. We could write those tests. Perhaps I'll do those offline just to make sure that they wind up getting into the repository. But we're only making kind of direct calls on our application. If we and we're missing things potentially like the CSRF token that comes through the CSRF filter. If we want to do more complete testing of our web application, we kind of have to simulate it running inside of a web browser. Now, fortunately, and so the first reaction might be, well, then we just have to open a web browser and go through it. But manual testing is problematic because we don't do it all the time. It's much better to have automatic testing, and fortunately there is a way to do automatic testing of things inside of a simulated web browser, and that's what we'll come back and do in the next video.